Okay, Kipsters, so in the last video that you might have seen, we spent a lot of time doing shading, and we were converting fractions into decimals by shading in what's called a 100 grid. Today, we're going to do the same sort of thing. We're going to convert fractions into decimals, but we're going to do it without using a 100 grid, because a 100 grid takes a long time. Today's color of the day is purple. A review from last time. As I hope you now know, fractions can speak any language. You want to make a fraction speak 7-ish? That's 2/7 or 3/7. You want a fraction to speak 15-ish? Do 4/15 or 7/15 or 9/15. But decimals, on the other hand, at least for 5th grade, only speak 3 languages. Tenthas, hundredthas, and thousandthas. Those are the blocks on Thuggish Ruggish Road. One way, as I was talking to make fractions into decimals is by shading in a 100 grid. But that, my friends, takes a long time. So instead, today, we're going to do a way that doesn't require any sort of drawing. We are going to make what's called a proportion. And it looks like this. Problem number 1. What is 4/5 as a decimal? Well, 4/5 does not speak a decimal language right now. It speaks 5-ish, and we want it to speak tenthas, hundredthas, or thousandthas. So our first step, step 1, will always be to write a proportion and to try to make this fraction speak tenthas, or hundredthas, or thousandthas. Let's start with the smallest one, tenthas. Up here, we're trying to figure out what that is, so that's going to help us with our answer. You can label that any letter you want. It's a variable. A variable is just a number in disguise. I call it n because that could stand for number or negron. So that's the first step. That's your proportion. Step 2 involves something you've learned how to do when you have a proportion, which is cross multiply. So you do 4 times 10. Well, that's pretty simple. That's 40. And then you do 5 times n. And what we want that to look like for 5th grade, and you may have seen it a little different elsewhere, is just 5n. So right now all we're saying is 40 equals 5 times a number. There's an invisible multiplication sign there. So we need to figure out what that number is. That's not too difficult. So 40 equals 5 times a number. We want to do the opposite of the operation that's on this side of the equation. The operation is multiplication. The opposite of that is division. So we're going to do 40 divided by 5. Count by 5, don't pass up 40. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. My fingers say 8, and an 8 pops up. My mouth said 40, and a 40 goes down. Hook the line, subtract, 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 subtract. I get a remainder of 0, which is great because now I know that n equals 8. So we make sure we write that n equals 8, which means we're so close to being done because we just found that 4/5 is the same thing or equivalent to 8/10. And look what we just did. We made something that doesn't speak a decimal language speak a decimal language. 8/10 is a fraction you know how to write as a decimal. All you do is put the 8 in the tenths place. You can put your 0 over here. You can put a 0 over here if you want to. It doesn't matter how many. But 4/5 is a decimal. Well, that's 0.8 or 0.80. Let's go to a trickier problem. And for the trickier problem, let's change our color to red. Okay, here we go. 3/20 as a decimal. The steps are the same. Oh, that's still purple. What's up with that? I might have to keep it purple if something doesn't change here. Okay, 3/20. There we go. Step 1. We want to make 3/20, which speaks 20ths. We want it to speak a decimal language. Always try to set a proportion equal to 10. Why not? See if tenths works. Step 2. We're going to cross multiply like normal. 3 times 10. Well, that's not so hard. That's 30. Equals 20 times n. We're going to call that 20n, which is the same thing as meaning 20 times n. Step 3. In order to find out what n is, we need to do a little division. We'll put 20 outside the house, 30 inside the house. Count by 20, don't pass up 30. 20, 40, oops. Finger said 1 and a 1 pops up. Mouse says 20 and a 20 goes down. Hook the line, subtract. Subtract, subtract, subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1. 0 minus 0 is 0. Oh boy, we have a remainder. And in order to convert a decimal into a fraction, we need to be able to do this so that there is no remainder when you solve for n. So let's stop for a second and think. We tried the language of tenths and it didn't work. But what we can do is try the language of hundredths. So watch how simple this is. It's not even that much more work. We try to make 20. We tried to make 3/20ths, 3/10ths. Now we'll try hundredths. Step 1. I just made a small change. Now it's 3 times 100. Oh, well that's just 300. 20 times n, that stays the same. Okay, so now instead I have 20 on the outside, 300 on the inside. I already started my division. Now I can pull down the shade. Every time we pull down the shade, we must count by 20. Don't pass up 100. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. Check this out. It goes in 5 times evenly. We do not have a remainder. The remainder is 0, which is exactly what we want. We found n equals 15, which means that 3/20ths equals 15 over 100. We just made a fraction that does not speak a decimal language into a fraction that does speak a decimal language. We know how to write 1500ths. 0.15, put your 0 up there. So 3/20ths is 0.15. The moral of the story here is you try tenths first. If it gives you a remainder, try hundredths. If it still gives you a remainder, try thousandths and keep going. All of that should get you set to converting almost any fraction into a decimal.